Welcome to the first Madness U tutorial on Madness Labs. I'm Bobby and I'll be your guide through all of these Madness U tutorials. The purpose of these tutorials is to teach you the methodologies and tools used to make enterprise-grade web apps. I don't assume you know much about web design outside of basic HTML, CSS, and maybe a dab of JavaScript. These courses aim to help you take your web design skills and tune them to making web apps by following me through lessons that I learned through the years of making scalable web applications. We may eventually cover more basic topics such as basic HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, depending on demand via comments and such. But for now, you should see these as an intermediate level tutorials. So now that you know a little background on what our goal is, let's get to our first lesson, which is GIT. Now first off, what is GIT? GIT is a command line library that was made by the creator of Linux. When making giant sources of code, it gets very confusing very fast. I'm sure you've written a website where you had 1,000 lines of styles, and it's very hard to kind of muddle through that and find where you need to be and stay productive. And so Linus, the creator of Linux, created GIT in order to have versioning for Linux, as it is an operating system. It has millions of lines of code. So that's what it is. I'm not a command line guy myself. I believe that the more I stay out of command line, the more productive I am. And so I use a series of tools in order to make my life easier. Not that I don't sit in command prompt all day, because I definitely do, but I like to put in GUI where GUI is needed or welcome. So why would I use a versioning software? So why? Let's to answer that question, let's take through a scenario. So you're on your laptop or your main desktop station, and you pull up a project like Madness Pass here, and I go ahead and make a whole bunch of changes to CSS and to my JavaScript, and I upload these to the server, and all is well. And then I go on vacation, and I take my vacation bag with me and my laptop in there. When I make some edits on the road, I go ahead and realize that that was like a 2-week-old version of code, and so then I push those changes to the server, and now I've lost 2 weeks of work. When I get home and I pull that down, or everyone's been there. You make some changes on one machine or on one file or something, you pull it down the wrong time, and then you end up losing a bunch of work. So GIT is essentially saves us from doing all of that work. It's our lifeline, basically. So to utilize GIT, as I said, I use a tool called SourceTree, and you can grab it by just going to sourcetreeapp.com. I've already got it installed here, but this is what you'll see when you come to their website as of today. And you just click on this download guy. Only available for Windows and Mac. Sorry, Linux users. But basically, you just download it, install it, and then if you don't have a GitHub account, you're going to need one, because every tutorial we do here will be orchestrated through GitHub, and it's just as simple as going to github.com like I just did, signing up for an account, and then you'll be able to actually sign in on that GitHub account on SourceTree, and that'll allow you to pull down code that you have access to, keep everything kind of organized. It's a really neat program, and GitHub really makes your life as a developer much easier, along with Git and SourceTree. So let's go ahead and pull it open just so you can see what it looks like. Here's SourceTree. It's very simple. So I have open here one of the projects we have hosted out on GitHub, Madness Pass. And you can actually pull this project down yourself by going to github.com/Madness Labs. and you'll see Madness Pass and Engine RTE, the two open projects we have right now. You can pull this down, look through the code, see the changes. But basically, let's focus on source tree, because that's kind of why we're here. So how does it work? So here is the timeline. So it's very linear, but these things can get very complex and convoluted very quickly as you have multiple people usually working on a project, or multiple different computers that you could have, et cetera, that are branches and all that stuff. But I'll just describe the basic functionality, because that's mostly what you'll use when you start utilizing it, and you'll see the needs for the more advanced stuff as you get deeper and deeper into it. So here's the timeline. This keeps track of all the changes, and you'll actually be able to click back through the timeline and actually see the code that changed, and then even granularly all the way down to what got removed and what got added, which is a very, very nice feature. You can always roll back on the timeline to a previous state. So if you push something that broke something, you can always roll back to an earlier state at some point. Really makes your life a lot easier and a lot less risk of overwriting code and losing weeks of work. Then on the left you have your branches, your remotes, all stuff that we really just don't have the time to cover with programs very in depth. I'm just scratching the surface with this. But basically, as you make changes to your code or to anything, they're going to show up on this timeline. And then you'll actually be able to, for instance, if I open up Madness Pass, if I open up this project and were to, say, on the index page, just type in a bunch of gibberish and then save that, when we jump back over to source tree, we're going to see that pop up because it's tracking all the files on our local machine. And then we're going to see the changes that I made to that file, and then we're going to be able to actually stage them, which means I'm done editing these files. I'm ready to put them to the server. Then we can commit them, and then if I check this little box down here, it's automatically going to push it off to GitHub, where the source lies right now. And then I can type in a little message to tell in detail what I did. All great stuff. Even if you're just working on a project by yourself, just having this timeline feature, having the fact that you're not going to lose your code is very, very good. And if you're a command line guy, or if you're somebody who really likes the nitty-gritty and wants to know behind the scenes how Git really works, I'd really highly recommend that you check out Code School's free course that they did on Git. It's codeschool.com/courses/try-git, and it's GIT, by the way. But basically, just head on over there. They've got a great free course that you can go through, and a giant recommendation for Code School. This has been one of the best learning resources. I've tried Lynda, I've tried Code Academy, a bunch of different ones. Really like what they're doing over at Code School with the production quality and just kind of what they put out. But that's pretty much it. I wanted to start very, very simple. And this was the first big step for me over the last couple of years working with businesses and enterprise scale applications, and really taking myself from a web designer to a web application maker. You really got to learn the tools of the trade, and one of the biggest ones is your versioning software. This thing is going to save your life and on a million different times. And it really comes full circle when you start deploying your application to the server, rather than using like FileZilla or something like that, where you're FTPing and manually copying files over. The repo ends up being the gatekeeper for changes that go to the server and stuff that you're just working on locally, which we'll get into a little bit more in the future tutorials. But I just wanted to scratch the surface here, get you guys set up with a new tool that really is going to change your life. So I think that about does it for the first tutorial. I hope you guys have learned just a little something. Download SourceTree, play around with it, push some code. You're always welcome to pull down our projects from our GitHub. And next week we'll be covering a little bit about some compiling. So compiling from less into CSS, SAS into CSS, and of the sort. And we'll probably cover that for a couple weeks. to kind of get the full grasp of why you should be compiling your code, how you can break it up, how it becomes more logical and more easier to deal with. So that's what we're going to be covering for the next couple lessons. But first off, you got to be able to know how to use GitHub so you can pull down all of our example projects. So have fun, Madness members, and we'll see you next week.